As you have heard, today is Shabbat Zachor, the Sabbath of Remembrance. It occurs on the Shabbat just before Purim, and this day is a sober reminder of the fear, violence, treachery, attempted genocide, and also redemption of the Purim story. A bit of background. The scroll of Esther, the Megillah, is recited on Purim, which is this coming Thursday evening. It is a dramatic tale full of court intrigue, gossip, banquets, drunken and sexual revelry, vicious plots, and cunning strategies. A story very similar to the times we're living through right now. Purim actually celebrates the clever, courageous Queen Esther, helped by her cousin Mordecai, who saved the Jews of Persia from the extermination plot of the king's vizier Haman. Every little Jewish girl wants to grow up to be Esther, the smart, brave, and beautiful heroine. Our wonderful alto, Helen Karlaski from our choir, is here to sing Esther the Queen, a duet by Michael Isaacson. Let us remember with true emotion,
let us pay homage to Esther the Queen,
and rekindle the embers of true devotion. Esther, we give you our blessed esteem.
Let us honor the day that we set for Purim,
honor the story and all it can mean,
for the valorous way that she saved our people,
honor the glory of Esther the Queen. We know Haman, foe of Israel, plotted a slaughter, each son and daughter soon would fall. But mistress of the king, Ahasuerus,
she stood before him, proud and tall,
saved us all. Nations may flourish on high ambition,
only to weaken and pass from the scene.
But the Hebrews will nourish their strong tradition, always protecting, always reflecting, always perfecting. Lest we forget that we yet are indebted to Esther.
Lest we forget that we yet are indebted to Esther.
Lest we forget that we yet are indebted to Esther the Queen. Esther the Queen! As you can tell, Purim is a joyous holiday for Jews with special foods, comic ploys, and the commandment found in the Talmud to drink so much that you can't tell the difference between the villain Haman and the hero Mordecai. I don't recommend that you try this, though. But the story really begins with Vashti, King Ahasuerus, Queen Vashti's inebriated, boorish husband, sent messengers to her demanding that she appear before his drunken, all-male party of guests who had been carousing and drinking for 7 days. She was to wear only her royal crown, to display her beauty to the debauched crowd of powerful men. The Midrash states that Vashti wisely sent her own emissaries back to the king 3 separate times, attempting to persuade him to change his mind about this degrading summons. She first appealed to logic, saying, "If they see me and think me beautiful, they will want to lie with me and they will kill you. And if they see me and think me ugly, you will be disgraced because of me." That strategy didn't work. So Vashti sent a second emissary, addressing the king's sense of honor and self-respect, demanding that he act as is fitting for a king. No dice. Finally, she appealed to his compassion and asked that he not insist upon her appearing naked before all his guests. Ahasuerus still insisted that she come, and so Vashti finally refused outright. Vashti's strong stand to maintain her dignity and self-esteem is unprecedented in the Bible. Other biblical women, when refusing to follow men's orders, did so through stealth and subversion. By standing up to Ahasuerus and saying no, Vashti became a threat to the male social order. The Babylonian rabbinic sages were so troubled by Vashti's defiance, they made up fairly bizarre reasons why she would not appear before the king. One story is that the angel Gabriel came and affixed a tail on Vashti, and she was too embarrassed to go before the king with a tail. Another strange reason was that Vashti had broken out with leprosy. Neither was the case. The king's ministers told him that all the women of Persia would follow Vashti's example and defy their husbands. So the king banished Vashti from the palace forever. Ahasuerus declared that all wives will give their husbands honor both to great and to small. But Vashti was preserving her own integrity. She was the one with royal blood, after all. Her grandfather was Nebuchadnezzar, the great Babylonian king. She was a woman of substance and fortitude. So Vashti lost her place as queen because of her defiant attitude. We can see our progress as a society by examining the clash between the president and Maine's governor, Janet Mills, 2 weeks ago. After a bit of give and take, the president threatened to withhold federal funding from Maine unless Governor Mills followed his edict banning transgender athletes from competing in women's sports. She responded, "See you in court." Succinct and effective. The governor has gotten pushback and criticism, but she is standing strong. The same with the Episcopalian bishop, Marian Buddy, who gently requested in a public worship service that the government have compassion and mercy for those who are powerless. She did not back down either. They are both inspiring models for today's women, and unlike in Vashti's case, they are still in their positions of power. Back to the Megillah. Esther, who hid her Jewish identity, enters the story, winning the king's beauty contest and becoming Persia's new queen. Her cousin Mordecai had previously refused to bow down to Haman, enraging and maddening him for the perceived disrespect. So, Haman then learns that Mordecai is a Jew, and this triggers Haman's murderous plot against the whole Jewish people. Mordecai finds out about Haman's plan to annihilate every Jew in the kingdom and tells Esther she must approach the king, plead with him, and save her people. Esther, of course, is terrified and reluctant. Going to the king without being summoned could mean her death. It was against the law. Esther tells Mordecai that the Jews of Shushan must fast with her for 3 days to hone her determination and inspire her to act. So Esther fasted and decided to change Mordecai's plan. Instead of going to the king and pleading with him for mercy, which she knew would not work, Esther decided to sway Ahasuerus with pleasure. To put her plan into place, first, she had to be courageous and approach the king, terrified she would be put to death for her intrusion. Instead, he welcomed her and offered Esther half of his kingdom. Realizing that this was a trap, she instead invited Ahasuerus to a banquet, asking Haman to come as well. When that was successful, she then invited them both to a second banquet. Instead of supplication or defiance, Esther had decided to use her beauty and desirability with the power of good food and drink to charm the king. Esther then, with brilliant timing, revealed her Jewish identity and declared that Haman was planning to kill her and all of her people. For Esther's sake, the king had Haman executed and the Jews were saved. Esther did not stay silent, and because of Esther's daring and astute action, the genocide was averted. Vashti defied the king for her own honor, refusing to be objectified, and Esther, with valor and strategy, chose to use her beauty and charm for her people's survival as well as her own. Both stood up for themselves in their own ways. She said no to the king. She said no to the king. She said no, 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 no. She said no to the king. Without her gown, he summoned her down, said it was his right as a man with a crown. He was obsessed she should be undressed, but Vashti refused to be a woman oppressed because she said no to the king. She said no to the king. She said no, 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 no. She said no to the king. The king then cried, "Find me a bride. She must be beautiful and have no pride." When Esther came, he said, "You I will tame. And if you don't like it, well, Vashti's to blame, because she said no to the king. She said no to the king. She said no, 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 no. She said no to the king. So Esther was brave, but the court was depraved, and Haman, the evil one, ranted and raved. She took a stand, yes, she made a demand. The Jews should be saved throughout the land. She said no to the king. She said no to the king. She said no, 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 no. She said no to the king. She said no, 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 no. She said no to the king. There's a lesson in that song. As Rabbi Diane Kohler-Esses stated, we need those who walk out of a room on principle And we need those who enter a system and steadily work through it for the sake of a higher vision. We need honesty, and we need stealth. Today is International Women's Day, and though we've made many positive steps forward, there are still women who need help and support across the globe. The brave Israeli women spotters of October 7th, many of whom died at the brutal hands of Hamas, show the need of women to be acknowledged, to be heard, and how disastrous it can be if they are not. The spotters warned for weeks in advance of Hamas's military buildup on the Gazan border, but the army's male establishment brushed aside their warnings as not being accurate or true because the spotters were young women. Many people died or were taken hostage because of the army's prejudice. In some countries, women are not valued, not allowed to go to school, to vote, to show their faces, to work outside the home, to have their own opinions. There are many organizations that help these women, but American Jewish World Service is one of the best. Check out their website if this is a cause that speaks to you. This year is the 50th anniversary of the ordination of Cantor Barbara Ostfeld, the first woman ordained cantor. Because of her talent, she stood up to and overcame the stereotypes held by both men and women. These days, no one says women can be cantors. Barbara is why. The wonderful first woman director of HUC's Debbie Friedman School of Sacred Music, Cantor Jill Abramson, said, "Barbara churned up the landscape, dislodged rigid attitudes, and widened the path for the generations that have followed. Cantor Ostfeld's leadership opened the doors for many, many women, and the female Reform Cantorate is now 400 women strong and growing. I personally was ordained by Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in 1992, but I could never have become a cantor without Barbara Ostfeld's vision. 50 years of women in the cantorate is an amazing, joyous thing. And in commemoration, the organ preludes and postludes by Lily Boulanger, Emma Lou Diemer, and Fanny Mendelssohn, and several of the sung musical pieces in today's service by Debbie Friedman, Margot Azen, Razel Robinson, and Bela Ruchama, were composed by women. In 2008, our Reform movement produced the Women's Torah Commentary, an amazing compendium of Jewish scholarship and teachings entirely written by women. Elisa Slotkin of Michigan chose this Bible commentary to use at her swearing in to her freshman year as a U.S. Senator. She was inducted into her new Senate position with her hand on this wonderful book. She also gave the Democratic response to the president's speech this last Tuesday. Her words include suggestions for how we can take action. First, don't tune out. It's easy to be exhausted, but America needs you now more than ever. If previous generations had not fought for democracy, where would we be today? This is such a Jewish response. L'dor vador, from generation to generation, Jews have fought for justice. It is a major Jewish value, and we need to continue the fight in our generation and beyond. Second, Hold your elected officials accountable. Watch how they're voting. Go to town halls and demand they take action. That's as American as apple pie. It is also Jewish. In Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Tarfon said, "You are not obligated to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it." A task may seem overwhelming, but you cannot allow yourself to be paralyzed by the enormity of it. You still must engage in meaningful action. Third, organize. Pick just one issue you're passionate about, like the work of the American Jewish Committee, Jewish World Service, and engage. And doom scrolling doesn't count. Join a group that cares about your issue and act. And if you can't find one, start one. Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel said, "Action is the only remedy to indifference." He also said, "I swore never to be silent whenever and wherever human beings endure suffering and humiliation. We must always take sides." Do not be silent. Use your voice. Choose justice. Show up and take action. Vote for Artza in the World Zionist Congress elections next week. Let our reform voices be heard in Israel. Help Hayas care for refugees and asylum seekers. Donate to Mazon, a Jewish response to hunger. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, inspired by beloved, strong leaders who used their voice, like Cantor Barbara Ostfeld. We also must pass along our beliefs in tzedakah and compassion to the next generation, Lidor Vador, from generation to generation. Lidor Vador, Lidor Vador, Lidor Vador, Nagid Gud Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Kiddushatcha Nakdish. V'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush leolam va'ed ki el melech gadol ki el melech gadol v'kadosh Lidor Vador, as we learn from the Purim story, the courage of one person has the power to change the world. Let that person be you. Shabbat Shalom.